talking to her. Art of convent. Had to find out what she likes. Wonder Woman. It's all about Wonder Woman. Yeah.
Okay, and welcome to episode 8/11. And why is it called episode 8/11, you may be wondering? Because it is the episode in which we are going to cover strength or lust. And of course, as you know, because you're a tarot person and you're listening to this podcast, there's a problem with the numbering of strength or lust. And that problem's a bit of a complicated one, so I'm going to let Mel go first.
Thank you. The hot seat. So,
give it a try.
I would say that originally when cards first started to be numbered, at least, I mean, for a time they were unnumbered completely, but then Marseille decks started to have a numbering system. Strength was or fortitude, as it may have been called, was at the 11 position, and justice was at the 8 position. But that created a bit of a twist in the numbering order of the zodiacal signs, because clearly in both, no matter what you number it, this card with a woman and a lion is associated with the sign of Leo, whereas justice or adjustment is clearly with the scales associated with the sign of Libra. And yet by numbering them that way, the order was then switched so that they didn't fall in the appropriate order, Aries through Pisces.
Right, because you had Chariot being Cancer, and then you wanted to have Leo, which would be Strength, which would be 8 after Chariot. But if you had Justice there, then it was like you were skipping to Libra.
Right. So there were supposed reasons for that switch. I've heard explained as they were thinking more numerologically than astrologically when they made that order, and that they considered the 8 as associated with balance. And you can kind of see that if you think of the 8 as being the two pans of the scales, perhaps.
Right.
The pivot point. It's also interesting, though, Libra is the pivot point of the zodiac. If you look at the order of the signs, it's right there in the middle. Anyway, when Waite made this deck along with Pamela Coleman Smith, he switched the order.
Actually, I think the Golden Dawn did.
The Golden Dawn,
even prior to that.
Right, the Golden Dawn and Waite as part of that made the switch to restore the order of the zodiacal signs. And
so now you have Chariot, Cancer, 7, and you have Strength, Leo, 8. You have Hermit, Virgo, 9.
Right, so it puts them back in the proper astrological order. However, when Crowley did his deck, he reverted them back to the original Marseille order because he felt that that was the correct order. And this then ties back into the whole switch that he also made between the Star and the Emperor that you may have heard us talk about in the episode on the Emperor card, basically where he also then switched the paths of those cards. So that diagram that you'll see on the website in both episodes refers to that switch where one creates a twist in the zodiac in the order of the numbering, the other creates the corresponding twist at the opposite end of the zodiac. The signs exactly on the other end are also flipped, but in the order of the paths.
And it's
thus
very
creating
symmetrical.
A symmetry.
Right.
There are other reasons that Crowley thought that, 8 should be adjustment and lust should be 11 as well. And so it all, fits into a bigger picture about that. And perhaps for now, that's all we'll say. And we just are going to call this episode 8/11 because it could be thought of as either, but they're both the card of Leo.
And we'll do the other one as justice as 11/8. But we have a nice diagram, which makes it much more easy to understand than us describing it. And that's on the website. So have a look there. And in the meantime, don't worry whether you call it 8 or 11, because ultimately it's all completely arbitrary. And, the sequence of majors dating back to the Marseille deck and before was really not quite fixed for a very long time. So don't sweat it too much. But meanwhile, here we are, ready to dive right in on strength or lust. And here we have right away, immediately, two major differences in the way we look at this card and its title. So strength in the Waite Smith card, lust in Crowley's card. We'll be talking lots more about that. Fortitude, as Mel mentioned, or force in the earlier decks. And then hermetically, Daughter of the Flaming Sword, leader of the lion. So we have here clearly two very different concepts of strength, but we are going to find a way to reconcile them because that's what we do.
Indeed. So Daughter of the Flaming Sword, that's a path reference in that the lust card is on that path of the flaming sword. So if you're not familiar with that path of the flaming sword, we'll put a diagram up for that. But basically it's a path that starts at Sephira 1, Keter, and goes in order through 2, 3, all the way down to 10. And it creates this like lightning bolt shape, or it kind of looks like a 777, but flipped in reverse. And it's called the Path of the Flaming Sword. And it speaks about the whole path of creation from the beginning down to the material world. And you'll notice that the path of Leo is right at the center of that flaming sword on that middle of the 3 horizontal paths. It's the middle one. So she's right in the center of the path of the flaming sword, thus the title Daughter of the Flaming Sword.
Right. And she's going from Chesed to Gevurah, right across the middle there. Parallel above her, we have the Empress, and below her, we have the Tower.
So looking at the Tree of Life, when you look at the path of lust or strength crossing that middle horizontal path, you'll notice that it crosses the path of the priestess, which is the moon. So you have that central point. So her path is from Keter, Tiferet. So we've got the solar underneath the path of lust, and the crossing is the lunar path. It just, again, is more sun conjoined moon, even if you look at where it is.
Right. The path of the moon crosses the path of Venus above, and then the path of strength, lust, solar path
but there's
below.
that cross point. So it's, I don't know, just visually you see the sun underneath that path and you see the moon crossing it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing about the whole strength lust, what Crowley has to say about the calling it lust versus strength. He says it's not just strength, it's vigor and the joy of strength exercised, or the joy of vigor and rapture of vigor. It's lust in that sense. I mean, as well as obviously the sexual sense, but there's that whole like lust for life. So they're very similar in a way.
Oh, yes. Yes, I think that's true. I think we can start right in with Leo because it was Crowley's rising sign, and one of the reasons that this card is so dear to Crowley. And of course, the most obvious reference to Leo on both cards is that giant lion. Right. You can't miss it. Why they just had to create that switch. Because, what other zodiacal sign could this possibly go with? The sun, of course, is the ruler of Leo. Nothing is exalted in Leo and nothing is fallen in Leo. Saturn is in detriment in Leo, but we see no references to that, I don't think.
Well,
do you see some?
I wouldn't say direct references, but there's a lot in Crowley's card about, Binah, which is a Saturn reference in itself, in Babalon.
You could say that.
There's Saturnine things there.
But they are certainly solar. There's a solar appearance to the card, period. It's just so yellow, so golden. So astrologically, the strength or lust card is associated with Leo, of course. So the minors associated with Leo are the 5, 6, and 7 of wands. So that's strife, victory, and valor, which kind of sums it up right there. You know, you've got these cards of effort, and but I think, you know, if you look at them one by one, you can see how that's playing out in each one. So the first one, so 5 of wands, is Saturn in Leo, and I don't know, I think we both think of that as the pressure cooker, don't we?
Yeah, so yeah, the first decan of Leo, which is ruled by Saturn, and interestingly enough, that was where the Golden Dawn placed the start of their alternate zodiac. Rather than starting at 0 degrees of Aries, they started it for whatever reason at
probably because
something
the
like 5 degrees of Leo, which is within the decan.
Right, because you've just had the summer solstice, which places the sun at the northernmost point of its.
Them being, you know, Golden Dawn being a sun reference, it's basically a solar organization. And you'll see on the caduceus at the central wand of the 5 here on the Thoth card. We've got Schwing, we've got the winged
solar disc.
The winged solar disc.
And
it actually has on it Crowley's seal there, which is a penis.
There you go.
Look
there you
closely.
go. Yeah. Wait, let me see. No, do I really want to see? Yeah.
It's looking at it from the top down view.
Wasn't his rising sign in?
Yes.
Was it in 5?
Yes. Yeah. He very much associated with Leo because that was his rising, and it must fall within this decan as well because he put his personal seal on it.
Right. And you know, it's interesting that this particular decan ruled by Saturn is, you know, perhaps the most difficult of the 3. I mean, because you have this strife aspect, this conflict aspect, but it's also strife is striving. It's the thing that you have to try for. Right. And without trying, there's no effort.
Not going to be easy because it involves Saturn and that
exactly
heavy structural leaden force is not really comfortable in the sign of fire. However, fixed, even though it's fixed fire, it's still fire. Right. You know, and Saturn is smothering the fire in a sense.
That's it.
The fire is trying to burst out through the earth.
That's right. That's right. So in 36 Faces, he talks about this as being a face or a decan where you direct attention. You use the spotlight of the sun to shine it in places where you want to apply pressure or to highlight.
Direct.
Yeah, to direct.
Direct seems to suggest structure in Saturn.
So there's this idea that you are the architect of the attention. You decide where it goes. And so this connection between Saturn and the sun that way, the spotlight. But also I just love that he sort of connected it with the black art of marketing, you know, look over here, not over there, you know, it's like forcing people to
like
turn
the magician directing attention to hide what's really going on in the other hand.
Yes. Where's the lady? Where's the lady? Yeah. So in the 6 of wands is Jupiter in Leo, and you can see that in the card, right? The card of the Lord of Victory.
Yeah, not only is it the central or more balanced decan, it's the central decan of the central sign in a sense. So it's a center of a fixed sign. So it's even more fixed. It's like the fulcrum of
fixed decan,
the,
fixed or succedent decan of fixed sign.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's the fixed decan in a sense, but anyway.
And it's Jupiter with the sun.
Right. So the Wheel of Fortune, you know, combined with the sun.
Yeah. I think of this as like the big personality card. You know, when you think of Leos who are very charismatic and kind of draw everybody to them, that reminds me of this.
And it's a generosity of spirit that makes those people like that. Yeah. They truly do like other people, even though they like themselves as well. They like, you know, they.
Yeah, but there's a big heartedness that comes with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Leo ruling the heart. So you can see how that's very appropriate.
Yeah, with the 6.
Yep.
Yep. And then we have for the 7,
Valor.
Mars. So this is interesting. Whenever you have a Mars card, you start looking for what that guy's doing in the card and just how hard a time he's going to give you. You know, so this is the card of valor. This is Mars in his courageous warrior aspect.
Right. The Tower and...
I remember I was listening
Or
to...
actually the Tower in Lust. So it's actually...
The
even
Tower
though
in
the sun,
Lust.
it's the Tower
Yeah.
in Leo and Lust,
Right.
which is really interesting to me because they're both horizontal paths.
Right, and then the Empress is the other one, so the
Right.
Lust card is almost the combination of the
Yeah.
Empress and the Tower, you know, that
Yep.
sort of sex and war
So even
thing.
though this card portrays a struggle, it's a struggle over which one is ultimately going to, if they persevere, what they're going to be successful at.
And this is also really...
It's a quest.
This is something I heard on an astrology podcast, this idea of valor. With Mars, he can be cruel and he can be strong and he can be hurtful, but he can also be a warrior with a cause. Like in the presence of the sun,
Right.
the sun, the king gives him this, you know, you are my solar warrior.
That's
you
why
are
I
my
think
hero.
of this as a quest
Yeah,
card. You know?
quest, the knight, and you know, those
Yeah.
Arthurian codes of behavior where the knight is constrained to act.
The Knight
well.
of Valor.
Yeah, the Knight of Valor. So strife, victory, valor, there, you know, none of these are shy cards. You know, this quality of Leo has a directness and an outward force that we see in all of them, really, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so let's talk about the lion, and especially the 7-headed lion in the Thoth deck, because that's like no lion that you have ever seen in real
Right.
life, I hope.
Right. Well, it's, you know, goes back to maybe you could get your Bible out and read some of the
Oh, yes.
Revelations imagery that kind of goes with it.
Right. Okay. So, well, chapter 12 of Revelation, we have, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Oh, that's the Empress. Remember that? We saw that in episode, what do you call it? 4. All right. So chapter 12 talks about the woman. And then chapter 13 goes, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. There. That's something like a lion, at least.
It's a beast.
Mm-hmm.
So Crowley identified with the beast for reasons in his personal history. This beast is Chaos, the father of life, and is paired with the woman of Revelations, or the Scarlet Woman, astride the beast. And it's more lunar and solar imagery, the sun and the moon conjoined.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also, if you have Crowley's Book of Lies, you can find it online, freely available as well. There's a chapter 49. So 49 is a number of Babalon, or the Scarlet Woman, in that it's 7 by 7.
Mm-hmm.
So chapter 49 is called Warata Blossoms, and it's a form of red flower.
That was Crowley's own vision.
Right. That was his poetry or his writing. I could read the whole thing if you want. It's not that long.
Sure.
So this is the full reading of Warata Blossoms. 7 are the veils of the dancing girl in the harem of it. 7 are the names, and 7 are the lamps beside her bed. 7 eunuchs guard her with drawn swords. No man may come nigh unto her. In her wine cup are 7 streams of blood of the 7 spirits of God. 7 are the heads of the beast whereon she rideth, the head of an angel, the head of a saint, the head of a poet, the head of an adulterous woman, the head of a man of valor, the head of a satyr, and the head of a lion serpent. 7 letters hath her holiest name, and it is Babalon. This is the seal upon the ring that is on the forefinger of it, and it is the seal upon the tombs of them whom she hath slain. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of Our Lady. For it is the number of a woman, and her number is 156.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful and dense. So,
Yeah. But there are the 7 heads, you know, the poet, the adulterous woman, the angel, the saint, the valor, man of valor, and lion serpent.
right.
But I think those are all aspects of Crowley himself.
They are aspects of Crowley, right.
They're elements of his psychology that I don't think he would argue with.
Yeah, for sure. And we should probably do a little bit of talking about Babalon, the woman of Revelation.
And, you know, we also need to just mention that, you know, the lion serpent is in reference to the Hebrew letter.
Yes, the Hebrew letter tet, which means serpent, and or snake, or to
lion
twist.
Serpent, or yes, yeah.
Right. So, and there's all kinds of serpents, you know, flying across the top of this card.
So now we can move on to Babalon.
Yeah, to the goddess herself.
Well, we could start with, you know, Crowley changed the spelling of the word Babalon to not have the Y in it, like, you know, the city of Babylon, but to have an A there in the center. And again, like many spelling changes he did there for reasons of when you do that, then you get the number of 156. Also, there are other reasons for that, okay, so if you break the word into its parts, you have Bab, that means gate in Arabic, and Al in the middle, which is God. So then we have a gate of God, and On, which is the city of the pyramids, or Heliopolis. So it's also referring to that Binah abyss, city of the pyramids, where it's the home of those who the abyss and give up all their attachments, empty it all into the cup of Babylon, give up every last drop of everything. They call that the Night of Pan. So it's another reference to that. So you have that all in the name. So you have the gate of God to the city of the pyramids in that name.
Okay, all right. And, well, one thing I've always wondered about is, you know, what role Babalon plays in Thelema. I mean, why is she so central? Why does he keep returning to this theme?
It's the first place that one gets to if they make that leap across the abyss, and it's the return to the arms of the mother. She's also an aspect of Nuit, which is a huge part of Thelema, and I don't feel like this is the time to really go into a whole lecture on what Thelema is all about. But clearly she's a huge part of it.
Right. No, there are people who are adherents of the goddess now. She's a very current goddess in a way. There are those who believe that we are in the time of Babylon. There's an entire printing press, Talismanic Publishing, a Scarlet imprint that's devoted to Babylon. The idea that she's kind of an apocalyptic goddess, a goddess who appears at times of extremity.
Yeah, she's definitely that, and more than that. You know, what you just said, it brings to mind that the poem, "The Center Will Not Hold," you know, and certainly she's like that. But she has another side. One reason why she's associated with the great whore is because she gives all. Not only does she require all and take every drop of your blood if you want to make that leap, but she also makes herself available to everyone and refuses no one.
Right. There's a wonderful passage in Neil Gaiman's American Gods where there's very much a Babylon figure. Her name is actually Bilquis, who comes in the guise of a prostitute and asks a client to worship her. And then in the course of the scene, he disappears into her body. He finds himself, you know, worshiping her with his body, worshiping her with his words, and then he's absorbed into.
That sounds very apt.
Yes. Right. And that is part of the face of Binah, you know, to be the mother and available to all, and infinitely promiscuous as well.
Yeah, she's yielded herself to everything and everyone.
Right. And she's, you know, it's interesting because there's There's an innocence about that. There's a purity and an innocence about the Babalon figure.
Right. It's just another form of the Virgin.
Right. It's Virgin and whore combined. And we really see the Virgin side in the Waite Smith card.
Yeah.
Right. They completely took a totally different tack and saw this figure in a different way, which gives you some sense of the Victorian discomfort with sexuality generally, the idea that it's something you must tame. And while the strength figure tames the line of passion by restraining or holding him back, the Babalon figure tames the line by writing and giving in.
One is controlling the animal passions and one is merging with them. That's the way I see the difference in these two cards. Another thing that a lot of people think that, okay, Crowley came up with Babalon. That is not true at all. He very much adopted her into his cosmology, but she was around far before he even came into the picture. I mean, if you know the John Dee and Edward Kelly scryings that they did with the Enochian tables, I don't know if they actually called them the Aethers in the same way, but they basically... Edward Kelly did a scrying where he received what's called the Daughter of Fortitude speech. So if you want to learn a lot about what the goddess Babalon is above, you can Google Daughter of Fortitude speech. Maybe we'll put it up on the website, but it's certainly easy to find. It's long, but it's very beautifully written, and it's a vision that Edward Kelly had and received the words of the goddess, and it starts out, I am the daughter of fortitude and ravished every hour of my youth. For behold, I am understanding, and science dwelleth within me, and the heavens oppress me.
That is beautiful.
And there's a lot more in it. He describes her, what she looks like and what she says. But yet it's even older than that because there's also another thing that you can Google for that's equally beautiful and profound called Thunder Perfect Mind, which is a text that was unearthed, Alexandrian times, is like the 2nd century. And it's, again, far too long to read, but it's talking about the archetypes that clearly sound like this same goddess, where she says, I am the whore and the holy one. I am the barren and many are her sons. And it's just, please Google it and read it, because both of those, if you want to understand this goddess, can say it far better than I can.
So there's this textual lineage that extends really far back that's basically the goddess coming through in one vision after another to people who write about her. What should we say about what she's holding in her hand in the Thoth card? Is this the Grail, like we were seeing in the chariot image?
Yeah, I think it is supposed to be the cup of Babalon, or the cup of Bina, and into which got poured the blood of the saints. So one of my favorite cards is this card in the Thoth deck because of how beautifully she did. What a great job she did. That negative space beneath the legs of the lion. Take a close look at that.
Yes.
Because it's not only, a symbol of the Hebrew letter shin for fire, but it's also those bloodless saints. So it's supposedly these beings, that have managed to make that abyss crossing and given every last drop of their blood into that cup.
So that's why they're faded, and then there's this, just radiant
right.
cup.
So they've lost all their attachments. They've basically given up their entire ego, their life, their being, their everything that makes them them in order to make that crossing. So supposedly that is what it takes, and that you shouldn't even attempt it until you're ready.
Right. Okay.
But it's so beautifully done. Look at
it
that
is
artistically.
Beautiful.
I mean, that's just genius.
And, and the way it works in the colors that you expect to see in the card.
Yeah, if you want to do color. So one thing I find interesting about the colors on this card, so it starts in the king scale with a yellowish green, but then if you go all the way down to the other end of the scale, the princess scale, it's a reddish yellow. Or
reddish amber, reddish
so
yellow.
it's like what that says to me. So yellow is the card of the sun. Leo is ruled by the sun. This is a very solar card. And so if we're starting in the king scale with one end of the spectrum of yellow and we're going all the way to the other end of the spectrum of yellow, I don't know. I find there's something like poetic and profound
Right.
about that to
There's
me.
something cyclical about it.
Yeah, and then so the other cards, the other colors in the card are the purples and the grays. And so I think of the yellow spectrum as being very solar, and the purples of the grays perhaps more lunar colors, because this is, I mean, well, those are also colors of Mercury, but yet Mercury and the sun, they're paired as we keep seeing it, but it's also a lunar. The gray and purple to me is lunar as compared with the golds, the yellows of the solar, just like this card is a marriage of the lunar and the solar. The woman is the lunar and the beast is the solar influence.
And if you go far enough into the purple, so it's indigo or black, then there you are in Bina again.
Right. And then you've even got the red for the other end, Gevura.
So looking at the Waite card, you have what is supposed to be a reference to the red lion of alchemy again, which we've talked about in the Lover's card, where you also see that. And it also has the solar yellow, of course, all over it. There's also an alchemical reference in the infinity sign above her head, because of course that this major and the magician are the two that have that infinity sign.
Yeah, and I saw that as somewhere. I saw that as evidence that this card should actually be 11 because of the Magus and the strength card both having that infinity sign. So there's the 1 and then there's the 11, and also if you put that, then they're each starting 1/2. The two cards with the infinity sign are each starting 1/2.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Of the cycle.
Yeah. Or it could just be an 8.
For what it's worth. You know, everybody has their theories, and that was yet another one.
Yeah, you could just
that
say that.
Ran across. One more thing with the whole 11 as this card. The 11, when I was just thinking about it, and this position on the tree of life, she's between the two pillars, you know, it makes me think of the 11. And also as Leo having the ruler of the sun, and you think about the 11 being like the central point in the major arcana, the sun should be at the center of all the zodiac and all the planets. So I don't know, I kind of like its position there in that sense as well.
Yeah, I think I can see where you're getting at. I mean, we do a lot of the rulership is based on the fact that the sign ruled by the sun and the sign ruled by the moon are together in the middle, and then everything else proceeds outward from there. You
know, you've mentioned before this whole thing about cards being associated with the senses. Didn't you say this taste?
This is the final one. This is associated with taste.
I mentioned that because I was just noticing that the lion's in the Waite card is sticking his tongue out. And I was like, what's up with the tongue? And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's taste.
Well, there's also something in taste that is the most immediate of the senses. I mean, if you're tasting something, you're incorporating it into your being. You're giving your all. You're
taking it in and assimilating it into your own body. And maybe that's also, you know, part of the divine ecstasy that's expressed in the Thoth card. You know, it's kind of like that divine drunkenness, that ecstasy, which I could see being very much like something tasting very, very good.
Yes, I mean, there is that connection between, you know, sex and hunger, these basic drives that you don't have very many of them, but they're intimately intertwined. And again, the idea of the Hebrew letter meaning snake, that twisting action, the kundalini energy, that all could be tied together.
Right. The kundalini energy is important. If you look at Crowley's card, he's got the serpent tail of the lion, perhaps in reference to that. And then also the 7 heads could be the 7 chakras.
Could be.
As the kundalini force rises from the base of the spine up through the crown.
Right. Another reference that I've seen for the Waite card, this is, I think, something that he himself said, was that this figure could be Astraea, who is goddess who's sort of associated with the Virgin associated with, but also associated with decay, justice. So, here we are. You have a reference to Virgo as the Virgin and a reference to Libra as justice.
Well, there's something there. I don't know.
They could position her possibly in the sequence.
The Virgo and Leo is definitely a connection. They're connected in the sequence of summer into fall, and also in the imagery of the woman and lion as the Sphinx.
Right. There is a passage somewhere where the lion gives way to Estrella, and that's that Leo Virgo connection there, as well as the idea of her purity and her chastity somehow overcoming the lion in this very Christian sort of context in the Waite card. But it's also really interesting, I think, one thing that I like to do with the Strength card is to think of it as a way of negotiating between the Chesed and Gevurah, the 4 and the 5. So, when you're dealing with 4 and 5 energies in the minors, one way to balance that is to go through the Strength card, just as you might go through the Empress card with the 2 and 3 and the Tower card with the 7 and 8. I don't know whether I read this somewhere or whether I'm talking out my ass, but I think I saw somewhere a reference to Sekhet and, the lion goddess who drinks blood.
Yeah. This definitely could be a connection there.
Yeah.
But I don't know what we want to say about that.
Other than that's another goddess archetype you can put in there.
Maybe you just want to mention that. And we could also say something about the whole, the woman and the lion. There also could be something between the symbolism of the woman and the lion that's expressing the Aquarius Leo axis, where, if you think about the old Aeon as being the Pisces Virgo axis, that would be the Pisces, the fish, and the Virgo, the grain, the loaves and the fishes, the Jesus and the Mary, the Virgin and the Messiah. And now you have the new Aeon with the woman and the lion, or the scarlet woman and the beast in Crowley's language. So that's the age Aquarius, the Aquarius Leo axis, which is the, age of Aquarius, this new Aeon that we're on.
And just to unpack a little bit with the Pisces and Virgo thing, the Pisces is associated with Jesus because of the fish reference. And of course, you can say that comes from Greek for fish is ichthys, which is Jesu Christou, Theohuios, it is Son of God, Soter, Savior. So that's the anagram that goes with fish, that goes with Jesus. This is, of course, a solar card, which is because of fire, because of Leo, because of the sun's rulership of Leo, which means that it's associated with yellow, which means it's associated with the note E, third note in the scale, red, orange, yellow. And although I've also seen it represented, and I think this may have been a typo in Robert Wang's book where he says it's E sharp, which is really F, because of the yellow greenish aspect of it. So make what you will of that. And finally, well, this is a familiar smell, but we use frankincense for solar sense.
I remember in one of our prior episodes, you mentioned that, all the gods love frankincense. And I think it's because, the frankincense, I associate it with the sun. And yet every planet, the reason it's so expressive of every energy is that every planet reflects the sun.
Every planet reflects the sun.
Sun's
At least
light.
the 7 planets, the visible planets.
The ones we're speaking of generally on this planet are the other ones that we see via the light of the reflection from the sun.
And frankincense, of course, was one of the 3 gifts to the sun, to frankincense, gold, and myrrh. And of them, I really think frankincense is the best. It's got this wonderful smell of wood shavings and
gold's not too bad either.
I wouldn't say no. But it's interesting how those are solar references, frankincense and gold. Myrrh, not so much.
Myrrh is more lunar, I would think.
I thought it was Saturnine.
Or Saturnine, Binah-y. Yeah, dark mothery.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so that does it for our episode on strength/lust. And we will be joining you next time with, hooray, the Hermit, one of my personal favorites in episode 9.